Hi, this is Dr. Randy Bach. Today's March 2nd, 2022, and I am here for yet another episode of Coronavirus Conversation. It's our weekly video cast that will go on forever because coronavirus is forever. I learned just the other day I do a separate podcast, which I'm happy to share with you, for the city of Newton, Massachusetts, where I live, and it is called um, the it's called Taxpayer Talk. It's the Newton Taxpayers Association, of which I'm the president. Go figure. And um, our mayor, Ruth Ann Fuller, gave her State of the City speech maybe a few days before President Biden's State of the Union address, and she said we've made great strides in bringing the city back to life, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're learning to deal with coronavirus, which is endemic. So there's a lot to parse there. I'm reminded of the old joke about lawyers, and I hasten to mention that I'm the product of a lawyer. My father was a lawyer. God rest his soul. He's a wonderful man, and I think in large part, I've followed in his in admiration of him, and I aspire to be as wonderful a person as he was. I'm not. Spoiler alert, but. So I like lawyers, but the joke is, how do you keep a lawyer from drowning? You take your foot off his neck, and um, and the concept there is that people have a disdain for lawyers, and you let them live by taking your foot off their neck. Well, I think we have noticed the same disdain for us from those people who have oftentimes their foot on our necks, collectively, individually, and they don't necessarily want us to come up for air. And insofar as they do, they'd like us maybe to remember that we, might very well suffer their feet on our necks once again. And so, thank you very much, Mayor Fuller, for bringing the city back to life. It didn't need to be as near death as it was made to be. The restrictions on our students were onerous. There still are. They're still wearing masks in our schools currently. They don't wear them in Congress. We were given our yearly, pretty much yearly lecture by the president, who's a near octogenarian, and his cohort, and all of a sudden, the House of Representatives no longer had a mask mandate. I think the day before the State of the Union address. How convenient! New York City did the same thing a year ago. They had mask mandates uh, uh, for gatherings, large gatherings, and then all of a sudden the New York Knicks made the playoffs, and boom, those things went away, and they were allowed, to have full audience because the Knicks hadn't made the playoffs in 10 or 12 years prior. So the events tend to dictate the science, so it's public health. Public, as I've said many times, comes from the same root word as politics, the people, and these are not sciences. These are applications of a certain amount of data with a certain amount of, a soupçon, a little sprinkle of desire and wishes and power. So the public health, you should probably, consider in the same phrase as political health, and not necessarily your political health, but sometimes their political health, maintaining their jobs, and probably just not maintaining their jobs, because I'm not sure it's really been productive for their electoral health and future elections to have acted so poorly towards us. But I think maybe it's just kind of that's that's the thing they like to do. There's an old joke. My dog needs to leave. I apologize. Everyone's a critic. Just probably tired of hearing me talk, but it's made me lose my train of thought. I apologize. Anyway, there's an old joke about a blind date between a sadist and a masochist. I hope this doesn't get too off color, but somebody knows one of each and figures they'll be the perfect couple. The sadist likes to be hurt. Excuse me, like to do the hurting, and the masochist likes to be hurt. Figure what better couple to have. So they match them up on a blind date, and they go out on the blind date and find a dinner, whatever. They go back to somebody's house, probably the sadist's house, and the mask is all ready and wanting to be hurt. It's like, please hurt me now, hurt me. And the sadist says no. And so it's a perverse joke because the sadist can get pleasure, I guess, by inflicting pain, but the pain is there because the masochist wants a certain type of pain and doesn't want to get the one that's, kind of the emotional pain. Maybe that's too elaborate a joke. Maybe it's really off-putting for my audience. I apologize, but the point is, there's a certain kind of pleasure, I think, in politics in having control, and that's, I guess, the essence of that joke. That the real, it's not just the kind of the beating that happens. It's kind of the ability to twist and turn your less fortunate partner, and there's this, maybe I don't think it's quite sexual, but there's a certain kind of type of pleasure that people perhaps in politics get from this kind of aspect of control and being the center, the focus of attention. I think that's similar in acting. People get up and they want to perform, and they don't necessarily feel whole unless they are doing that. There's a great short story, I don't remember the name of it, from Kurt Vonnegut, where this man and woman meet as actors in the play. I think they're in Romeo and Juliet, say, and they absorb those roles and they fall in love. But when the play's over, they don't really have anything on which to pin their lives, and they're formless, and the relationship's about to founder fall apart. And lo and behold, they find another community theater piece to be in. I think we see that with our acting celebrity classes. They fall in love while they're on the set, and then things fall apart afterwards because they can't maintain the kind of the romantic illusion that they have when they're fed lines and script. So I think there's a little bit of that there. I don't want to psychoanalyze the world because it's a big place, but there has to be some explanation for the kind of the twisting of what is apparent, historically in science, into the needs of the political class to absorb and maintain and control as much as they can, and continue to do so. I think they're some basic truths, and they've been kind of 1984 George Orwell adapted and adopted into other forms. Always historically, natural immunity, experience with a virus or bacteria is going to give you the best immunity, and nobody ever really has doubted that. And Wikipedia came up with changing the definition of herd immunity to vaccine oriented, which is never true, not true now, never been true. And we see this throughout. So, and we've been hearing that, until the kids get vaccinated, kids don't need to be vaccinated for this. There may be some things for which they do, and I've, given thousands of vaccines, but they don't need to be vaccinated for this. COVID-19 vaccine is producing a spike protein that is now a couple of years old. It's unrelated, for the most part. It's not completely unrelated, but it's somewhat unrelated to Omicron, which is really mild anyway, even for old people and oldsters and middle-aged people. It's a total non-factor. Even to the more dangerous version of the ancestral strain, kids didn't really get that sick here. I think there's a grand total, maybe zero deaths throughout the United States amongst 35 or 40 million young people, or maybe more, except in the cases of cancer, cystic fibrosis, hugely morbid obesity, and so forth. Aside from some rare comorbidities, kids, your normal kid, without any illnesses, without any medications, is not going to have any issue with the original COVID or any of the Greek letter alphabet variant strains since then. Certainly not Omicron. And there we have it. I've mentioned before multiple times that the monoclonal antibody treatments have been pulled off the shelf as the variant strains progress. So if you have a monoclonal antibody to alpha, you don't trot it out for beta or delta, Omicron, etc. The vaccines basically do the same thing. They produce a monoclonal antibody from us instead of injecting one that was from a different individual, from his serum or an animal, whatever. Basically, we're producing a monoclonal antibody by our own immune system. We take an injection that creates a spike protein. We create a monoclone, a single clone, a single set of antibodies to that one spike protein. So we are producing a monoclonal antibody with vaccine to the ancestral, when that you can't buy that. The FDA has pulled that version off the shelf. They pulled the subsequent one, the alpha, beta, the delta. They've pulled all those off the shelves. They've basically banned them because they're out of date. But somehow the monoclonal antibody that we would be getting from an injection is the one we make ourselves if we get the COVID-19 vaccine and or its booster. So it's really, way out of date, and it's pointless. So let's see what do we have in the news that I could reasonably discuss. I think this let me just pull the headline up here. This one is, not surprising, but it's somewhat shocking that, the New York Times finally awakened to the reality that we've been saying here all along. Over the weeks and months, I've said it's almost impossible to get good data from the CDC. And finally, New York Times, when I was a kid, was Captain Kangaroo grandfather clock was asleep, and every now and then he'd wake up and he'd be all surprised. And I mean, if you imagine, Joe Biden on, even one of his better days, something similar to that, he could probably, fill in for grandfather clock or vice versa. We might not even know the difference. But here, lo and behold, let's see if I can get her name right. Where is it? Apurva Mandavili, who's been, I think, with the New York Times for a couple of years. She, I don't know how she got in the New York Times, but the CDC isn't publishing large portions of the COVID data it collects. Oh my God, horrors. The agency has withheld critical data on boosters, hospitalizations, and until recently, wastewater. Okay, I'm not going to be able to read the whole thing for you, but I can certainly give you the URL. You can find it yourself. I recommend you read this. I did have I put out, I guess, a kind of a little capsule version here. Let's see if I can find it for you. Let's see. So I'll just pull this up here. This is the same article. So without the booster for 18 to 49-year-olds, they were it's hard to make full recommendations about the validity of the booster shots. Kristen Nordlund, second paragraph here, spokesman for the CDC, said the agency has been slow to release the different streams of data because, well, quote, basically, at the end of the day, it's not yet ready for prime time. She said the agency's priority when gathering data is to ensure that it's accurate and actionable. Another reason to fear the information, another reason is fear that the information might be misinterpreted, Ms. Nordlund said. Well, gosh, I mean, who's paying you, CDC? Like we are, all your salaries come from our taxes. We work hard, really hard. We pay you guys, and you're collecting all this. They're the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. You have the data, and you're not giving it to us. The line from Jack Nicholson. What is it? You can't. You don't want the truth. You can't handle the truth. That's the way they feel. It's patronizing, and it gets back to my earlier point that control and power are what kind of they're the real turn-ons for politicians. Which it's another joke is the politics is Hollywood for ugly people. I don't think politicians are necessarily worse looking, but probably you have to be better looking to get into than politics. Nonetheless, any rate, it's why wouldn't you give this data? And for me to do up my weekly talk here, you need good actionable data. And as I've said, go back to many of these earlier episodes, particularly middle of last year, I had to go to the Israeli website because they have up to the minute data, and they are trying to bring as much as they can as often as they can to the people. I think Israel's made huge mistakes, and they've somewhat been in bed with Pfizer. And I think it's kind of a Faustian deal, a pact with the devil they made. In a sense, they wanted to get the vaccine as early as possible, and so they kind of really were forceful, wanted to push it on everybody they could within the Israeli population. Not so much on the West Bank and so forth territories, but within kind of the say more Jewish portions of Israel, people are on their fourth shot, and this has been totally irrelevant to Omicron. And we pointed that out last week. Maybe I'll get a chance to show you again this week. But so they wanted to be first in line. They were, and they got as much vaccine as they needed, and I assume they paid for it. Maybe they got a discount. Never pay retail. But there are side effects from the vaccine, particularly insofar as it has no real use against Omicron, which has mutated away from that original version. See above the monoclonal antibody part. So what did they get out of it? Well, at this point, you're just going to be getting side effects, and there are some issues about the amount of side effects that are there with the virus. Excuse me, with the vaccine currently. So I'm going to maybe just touch on a couple of these slides, and I'll get back to the point I was making let's see, I'm just going to show you something here. Um, this is something I actually pulled up in writing my book about Zika, because this actually happened to me. Attempts at debunking fake news about epidemics might do more harm than good. This is the concept the CDC is working on. This is an article from 2020, a couple of years ago, in Scientific American. It's probably American. I'm not sure it's scientific. Batting down conspiracy theories about disease outbreaks such as that of the new coronavirus may prove counterproductive to public health efforts. Let's see if I can parse this. So they don't want to have to deal with people who disagree with what the CDC or Dr. Fauci says. Um, oops, sorry about that. Uh, so so they don't even necessarily want to be bothered at having to debunk quote unquote fake news. Now, what if in fact their news is the fake news? Don't we deserve better? Why is the CDC holding stuff back? If they have nothing to hide, they have nothing to hide. It's very obvious. And plus, we are paying for this stuff. We are able to get data on whatever other government agencies come up with, the inflation rate theoretical, although sometimes that gets a little clouded as well. So this is something to ponder about how your government treats you, and how much of this is science and how much of this is the political aspect of public health. Um, this is somebody, one of my friends brought this article to my attention. It's of similar import in a sense. It's from a couple weeks ago, excuse me, a couple days ago, and points out that natural immunity is stronger. I can give you a link to the article. I'm not going to go into this too much. It's sort of obvious. We've always been told that kids who kind of play out and get it active and kind of not quite play in the mud, but play with each other, get more colds, have more robust immune systems in later life. And why not? They get a library of more illnesses and viruses and whatnot, and they store them. I think it's usually pretty clear that somebody, and maybe people don't have books these days, but people with a bigger library and absorb more books have kind of a broader base of knowledge, and they can encounter more things. And the more experiences you have, the better able to do. I think the reasonable metaphor for life pertains to immune system. But somehow this is like with the the different definition of herd immunity. Everything's been vaccine centered. I'm not a conspiracy guy, but there is a lot more money in vaccines than just letting people get sick as it is. This is kind of the public part of public health in a way. This is a news article happening, I guess, now as we speak. You can see the way it's characterized. Ron DeSantis just yelled at high school students. He scolded them for not wearing masks. That's not quite the case. For better or for worse, he was having a press conference, and at I think one of the Florida State universities, there was a lineup of students. They're all wearing masks. They're all like 18, 19, 20 years old, and there's no reason for them to be wearing masks. I'm sure they're all vaccinated at this point. A, B, they never got sick in the first place. C, if they did, they wouldn't get sick. And they're doing it probably because of a political aspect, because he's up there and he's potentially a next Republican presidential candidate, or maybe one 4 years after that, and they want to show him up. And so he said, you don't have to do this. This is political theater. It's kabuki theater. Well, that's what I've been saying all along. Who else agrees with that? Essentially, this lady, what's her name? Nancy Pelosi. So if you Google the same phrase, there's DeSantis mask, and the articles pretty much are about what a bully he is. If you Google Pelosi mask, now she was in the news for mask items yesterday and the day before, because all of a sudden, boom, February 28th, she lifted the mask mandate within U.S. Congress. Why? Because Joe Biden's going to be talking there. She doesn't want to wear a mask. She doesn't want him to wear a mask, giving a speech in front of the nation. So all of a sudden, the science changed. The virus is not going to come for the State of the Union on March 1st, but would have done for just regular speeches on February 28th. The same thing happens in restaurants and all this kind of stuff here. She was out and about throughout the pandemic, as it were, or through the response to what was perceived as a pandemic, at least initially. And she was at kind of bars and this and that, and she was photographed in at various junctures without wearing masks, very close proximity to other people. So this is kind of a farce, and I guess that's not much of a slideshow this week, but I'll come back to maybe some other bits as we go. What are the other things? So it's kind of some of the concerning aspects about COVID are being kind of brought up with the Steve Kirsch, excuse me, Substack, and I recommend you go look at this. Here's it's Steve Kirsch's newsletter. It's stevekirsch.substack.com, and I don't know what to make of this, but I do think it should be brought up in public. Oftentimes we've seen the kind of people on the left are calling people on the right fascists all the time. And if you go back and look at actually what definitionally fascism is, I'm trying to actually find a text I sent to a friend of mine the other day. He asked me stop criticizing, and he's of the left, and he's like, what's good in the world? And I tried to, give him some examples of what's good in the world: open debate, liberty, and having some security, and basically I gave sent him a cartoon where freedom is leading security as kind of your guard dog, but at a certain point security gets so big and eats your freedom. That's not what you want. So safetyism has turned into a version of kind of crypto-fascism in a way. And I don't like to use that word, but basically if you look up the definition of fascism, here's a letter I wrote. It's implicit from the last two posts I sent you. What is good in the world? Open debate, liberties go hand in hand. They are both quashed by safetyism, such as we've seen, allied essentially with fascism in its definitional form. So this is the definition of fascism: basically centralized autocratic government, economic and social regimentation, forcible suppression of opposition. So the way we see kind of the alignment of tech, the press, politics, universities, against open debate, usually there's something there. There's some there. If you can't look in a certain place, you can't talk about a certain item. So I recommend you look at this. He's referring to Dr. Bhakti and Dr. Burkhardt, which almost sound the same, but one is from Thailand and Germany. The other is German national as well. And they are talking about the higher than released death rates from the COVID vaccine. Again, there's really no point in having this vaccine out currently because it's antiquated, and the people, everyone who wanted to be vaccinated has already been. So I recommend you look at this. What else do I have on my list for tonight? Pelosi mask. It's fun to go to Twitter and look at this kind of stuff. Here's Nancy Pelosi back in November. It says at Swingers Bar. I mean, I think this is actually the name of the bar. I don't think she's at a Swingers Bar with Representative. I just want to keep it straight here. Representative Yvette Clarke breaking, the mask mandate in D.C. If you go to Twitter and look up Pelosi mask, you can find this. Speaker Jim Jordan says, Speaker Pelosi dropped the mask mandates for politicians, but her Democrat friends still mask your kids in school. And just like that, Nancy Pelosi cancels her pointless mask mandate. Nobody's buying this. She's 81 years old, but your kids have to wear masks. So if your kids are still wearing masks, you have to do something about it. They're not going to do it for you. You have to get up and clamor for the right things to happen. So what else do I have for you tonight? I think that might be it. I'm going to be sort of brief because I got a few other things going tonight. Let's see if I can get rid of this. So what else is new? Not too much. I'm working ahead, getting my Zika book out. It's called Overturning Zika. I hope it will shed some light. I had some of the same issues where people didn't want to help promote my ideas about this 3 years ago, because they didn't want to break up the same narrative, the public health establishment. They didn't want to cast doubt. But, if you still believe in Santa Claus, you still believe in the tooth fairy, your parents told you that. At a certain point, you had to find out the truth. They might not have wanted that. The government seems to be paternalistic and doing a lot of things for their own interest and their own bulwark of information without sharing with you. So that's not right. Anyway, so I'm going to call it a night for tonight. Good luck to you.